What's up, everybody? Chris Pinnell here. We're going by tight end and defensive tier rankings for week 10 of the fantasy football season. If you enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. Let's dive right into it. And usually we would start with the S tier, but out of respect for Travis Kelce, we're going to keep it blank because that's his throne, and he's the only guy that belongs there every single week. So we're going to move on to the A tier, and we're going to actually kick this off with Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills. I know what you're probably thinking. Kind of a bit extreme to have him number one overall. Well, honestly, with no Travis Kelce this week and some quarterback situations / matchups for the other good tight ends, I don't think this is far-fetched. The Bills are in a great spot this weekend versus the Denver Broncos. Their defense is obviously not something to be too concerned about. They're allowing the third most points per game in the tight end position. And since Dawson Knox has been injured, Dalton Kincaid, the first-round pick for the Buffalo Bills, who we know has a ton of talent, has delivered. 8 targets in Week 7 versus New England, 15.5 fantasy points. 7 targets versus Tampa Bay, 17.5 fantasy points. And 11 targets versus the Bengals for 17 fantasy points. He is one of the best quarterbacks to get him the football. They have one of the highest implied team totals of the week. This is a great offense. I see no reason not to like Dalton Kincaid, so he is number one for me this week. I traded for him before last week, and I feel like I overpaid a little bit, but honestly, I've been happy with the returns, and I've been happy with what I've seen with no Dawson Knox. So I expect the good times to keep on rolling. Number 2 for me is Mark Andrews, and he would be number 1 if it wasn't such a bad matchup. The Browns have been absolutely shut down defensively this year. Now, I know it was a really bad situation for the Cardinals last week, but they shut him out. But so far this season, they're allowing less than 6 fantasy points per game in the tight end position, which is the fewest in the league, less than 20 receiving yards. And it's not like they've had an overall cakewalk matchup so far this season versus tight ends. They have faced Freiermuth before he got injured. They faced Mark Andrews before, and they faced George Kittle. But they have taken care of business. But Mark Andrews still deserves to be in this A tier based off of what we've seen from him so far this year. We know the talent is there. 60 receiving yards, 5 catches, nearly 7 targets per game, 3/4 of a touchdown, 23% target share, 51% weighted opportunity share, and your 24% market share of the team's air yards. And when the ball travels through the air in Baltimore, it's either going to Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews, so I'll take the upside with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. Then TJ Hawkinson still is going to make the cut in the A tier. I realize he lost Kirk Cousins, but he still should be very busy with Josh Dobbs under center. We saw him have fantasy relevant tight ends in Zach Ertz and Trey McBride over in Arizona. And while the matchup isn't exactly amazing here, but the volume's still there, and on the season, he has been used heavily in this offense, 22% target share, nearly 9 targets per game and 60 receiving yards. And we know he's one of the most talented tight ends in football, so he still deserves a spot up in the A tier. Then in the B tier, honestly, these guys are borderline A tier, but I don't want to have everybody in the A tier because that defeats the purpose of having tiers, to have everyone in the same spot. But Sam Laporta for me and George Kittle, both guys from Tight End University in Iowa, both studs, just not quite as high for me as the 3 we just talked about. But George Kittle, for one, he's a lot more up or down. We know he has a super high ceiling and have those explosion games. We've only seen 5 targets per game this year on a 19% target share. As for Sam Laporta, we're getting over 7 targets per game on a 22.5% target share, half a receiving touchdown per game, a 50% weight opportunity share, also 54 receiving yards. Plus, I just like this game overall better versus the Chargers, should be back and forth, and we know their pass defense is horrendous. George Kittle, good spot versus Jacksonville as well, but Laporta is a bit safer for me. And now our C tier, we're going to lead off with Evan Ingram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's just an offense that will throw the football and gets pretty much everybody involved here. He's seeing over 7 targets per game this season on a 23% target share, over 6 catches and 55 receiving yards. The thing is, though, he has just not found the end zone once this year, but at some point that is going to change. And we have seen that this 49ers pass defense is not quite great, so I think there's definitely some upside here for the passing game over in Jacksonville. Dalton Schultz coming off a massive performance where he had 10 catches, 130 yards, and found the end zone as well. Explosion game from this Houston Texans defense. Well, I'm never going to expect that again. He still has right around a 20% target share in the season, seeing close to 6 targets per game and 40 receiving yards. And he's been in the end zone quite often, half a receiving touchdown per game this year. I should also mention this is the absolute best matchup you can ask for a tight end, as the Bengals are dead last, 32nd versus tight ends. They just faced Dalton Kincaid, who had 11 targets and 10 catches versus them, currently allowing 16.3 fantasy points per game and over 60 receiving yards. So I like Dalton Schultz to have another solid game, although obviously not quite like we saw last week. Then the next guy is someone that I just hate, because if you're an Alvin Kamara owner or have anybody on the Saints, and for DFS purposes, this annoys me as well, but when they get in the red zone or around the goal line, Taysom Hill is coming in and he is stealing your favorite player's points. But we just have to accept it at this point. And he has upside that no other tight end has based off his rushing ability, because no other tight end on the slate week in, week out is going to be running the football like Taysom Hill. If we look at his game log here, the past 3 weeks, 11 carries versus Chicago, 20 fantasy points, 22 fantasy points versus the Colts on 9 carries with 2 rushing touchdowns, Then week 7 versus Jacksonville, 5 carries, 18 yards. Then we saw versus the Panthers in week 2, 9 carries for 75 yards. He has the ability to throw the ball. He'll go out there and catch a ball as well. He got a receiving touchdown last week from Derek Carr. And I'm also pretty sure he threw a touchdown to Jawan Johnson, if I remember correctly. So he can do it all. And he's just going to be underprojected every single week because a lot of people are just going to look at, potential receiving stats and maybe a pass or two. But that rushing upside is unmatched by anybody else. So that's going to firmly put him in the tight end 1 status every single week because he is getting you the past 3 weeks, 16, 22, 20 fantasy points, even had 12 points versus the Houston Texans in week 6. So he's just someone that we have to start week in, week out at this point if you need a high ceiling, unless you have a better option like the guys above him. And then to round out this tier, we have Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears. So I thought that Justin Fields was going to be the starting quarterback all week, but it turns out it's going to end up being Teabag as he just got ruled doubtful. And if you are doubtful in the NFL, you're just basically out at this point. So it's going to be Cole Kmet, but we know the guy has touchdown upside. And he's actually had 2 solid games in a row, and he did well versus the New Orleans Saints last week. So I'm fine with Cole Kmet here. He's a solid middle of the road tight end 1 option this week. Moving on to the D tier, we have Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals. So it's no longer Josh Dobbs, and it's not going to be Tune from last week, which thank goodness. So Kyler Murray is back. And while I'm not sure exactly what to expect from Kyler Murray, especially with the new Call of Duty coming out, I'm sure that's going to affect him somehow because we know he's addicted to it, which, low-key I am too, so I don't blame him. But we know the tight end position in this Arizona offense has had plenty of production this year, so I'm fine with it versus Atlanta. We also have Jake Ferguson here of the Dallas Cowboys. They have a high implied team total this week at 27.5. Pretty soft matchup versus the New York Giants. And he just runs a lot of routes. And if you're running a lot of routes at the tight end position, you are going to be fantasy viable in a decent offense. And that's exactly how I would describe the Dallas Cowboys. And then at the very end, I'm not going to have an F tier, but Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons. I really wish Arthur Smith wasn't the biggest troll in fantasy football, but he is, so it's unfortunate. But we know Pitts has all the talent in the world, 50% weight opportunity share, 32% market share of the team's air yards. So he gets 5.5 targets per game, but with Taylor Heineke under center, I have at least a little bit more hope than Desmond Ridder. And then as far as the defenses are concerned, I'm not going to go individually because who wants to listen about defenses? And honestly, a lot of this is luck-based. But I pretty much had this in order of the Vegas implied team totals this week because the less points scored against your defense, obviously the better off you are going to be. Now, that's not the exact formula for it, but if anyone can come out here and tell you they can project defenses, they are lying to you because it's something extremely difficult to do. Now, some teams get more turnovers than others, and it depends on what quarterback they are facing, but a lot of that is baked into a Vegas implied team total. So for me, up top, the Cowboys are obviously the number 1 choice here. They have an 11-point implied team total against them. That is the lowest I think I've ever seen. To be honest, Tommy DeVito at quarterback, playing the Dallas Cowboys at home, good luck. Good luck. I would be surprised if they did get to double digits in this game, but it's always possible. And the Ravens facing Deshaun Watson. He's always good for a turnover or two, but this defense has been solid this year. Great versus quarterbacks, and Watson exactly hasn't been the model of consistency so far this year. The New York Jets get Aiden O'Connell in the Las Vegas Raiders offense that I am not concerned about. We know the Jets have some good pieces on defense, so I think they're fine to be in that A tier. B tier, all these teams, they're kind of middle of the road for me, all facing pretty soft offenses for the most part. I feel like the Saints could honestly make the jump up into the B tier, honestly, so I'll probably do that right there. But I feel pretty good about that list. The Bears defense, I don't respect a ton, but they are facing the Panthers offense. So if you need a defense off of waivers this week and just hoping for a few handful of points, this game is on Thursday night, so I can't imagine the scoring is going to be too high in this one. And the Panthers only have an 18-point implied team total, which is the 5th fewest of the entire week. So I think it's all right that the Bears are pretty high this weekend. Other than that, I don't really think there's anything to single out too much. I don't really have these in exact order, but they're all within those tiers. The Browns defense, we know how great they are, but facing the Ravens on the road, they do have a higher implied team total against them this week. I think they're coming in at 22 points. They're 6-point dogs on the road. So as good as they have been, Lamar Jackson's scary enough to where I'm really not excited about them as good as they have been. And really everybody below the C tier, they are startable in the right spots. But D tier below, these guys just have high implied team totals against them, or they're facing really good offenses that I just don't want any part of. Yes, the Chargers defense scored 30 fantasy points versus Zach Wilson and the New York Jets. That's great if you started them. Congratulations. That does not mean they're going to do it again this week. They have one of the higher implied team totals against them this week at home versus the Detroit Lions. 25 points. There is no way I'm starting the Chargers defense versus Jared Goff and the Lions offense. That has been straight cooking this year. Try to stay C tier and above. If you can't, Titans, 49ers, Patriots, I'm okay with it, but I don't love it. But with that being said, that's all I got for today's video. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. My must-start video out either on Thursday or Friday, so be on the lookout for that. But I wish you all the best of luck this week and whatever you are doing, and I'll see you all next time.